and welcome to Lizzie Watches Yaoi. And today I'm talking about Fish in the Trap, a very pretty animated series. Well, series, I say OVA. It runs for about 30 minutes, so it's short and sweet again. Well, I wouldn't say short and sweet. It's short and tragic and a little darker, maybe, a little bit more unusual, but at the same time full of like a very prominent yaoi trope that I will get to later. As for the anime itself, the animation is lovely, the character design is beautiful, it's very much done in the shoujo manga style. It's very clean, it's very crisp. I love the use of like shading and light on their hair. They got very expressive eyes. It's really nicely animated. It's like really good to look at and makes me want to read the manga, which never came out in English, unfortunately. But one day I'd keep telling myself that I will track it down and read it properly. But it basically tells the story of our main character, Taka. When he was a young boy, he was one day playing on the riverbank with his mate and the dog, and he noticed this handsome stranger watching him, who was called Yuji, because one of his security guards are like, "Master Yuji, are you done?" Yes. And he's like, "Yes, I'm done. I'd really like a dog." And then he gets in the car and drives away, and Taka's like, "That was random. I don't know him, but never mind." Flash to like the future, and young teenage Taka is now a swimmer, and he's just come third place in his latest swim run, and he's feeling like, yeah, it's not too bad, but there are always going to be people out there that are better than me. And then he sees this tall, beautiful man putting on his swim goggles and jumping into the thing and doing his swim race. And he's just mesmerized by this guy's beautiful long form, lovely legs, like his powerful swimming strokes, his handsome face. And he's like, wow, this guy is amazing. And this beautiful swimmer wins the race. And it turns out it's Yuji, the guy from the past. And even though Taka doesn't really recognize him, he's still like, this man is beautiful, and obviously kind of clearly falls like love at first sight. The story kind of continues from 2 points of view, a lot of it following Yuji. Now, so Taka and his friend are hanging out after the swim race, just chilling, and they want a drink. So the friend goes off to buy a drink. Meanwhile, at the same time, Yuji happens to be coming by, and a girl's all coming on to him going, "Oh, date me, you're single at the moment, date me. Come on, you know you want to." And then Yuji spots Taka sitting on the bench, and he's like, "Oh, I can't date you, I'm busy." She says, "No, you can't be busy." He's like, "I am training my underclassmen. We've got things to do." And she's all like, "Oh, God, just lie, fine, whatever," and stomps off, knocking over the mate who's carrying some drinks. And the mate's like, "What was that all about?" And then he looks down and sees that Taka is gone. And he's like, where could he possibly have disappeared to? Well, it turns out that for some unknown reason, Yuji has taken Taka to a cocktail bar and bought him a drink. And obviously Taka is looking particularly like, why am I here? This is weird. I am totally underaged. I'm probably about 15. I shouldn't be in a bar with a man that's clearly about, I don't know, 18 or something, who's drinking and smoking. And yeah, all round looking very uncomfortable. And this is when we meet Yuji's friends, a bunch of, handsome guys. One of them is the more feminine character design. He has the long hair, and it turns out that they've been taking bets on whether or not Yuji would, win the race. And it's like the holy trinity of, bad seeds to be hanging out with, because they've just done some betting, then they're drinking alcohol, and then they're smoking, and they think it's really funny to try and get Taka to, smoke a cigarette, and if one's forced on him, and he's like, "Bleh, that's gross," and then they tell him to drink his alcohol, and Taka's just like, "Please let me go," and they're all like, "Oh, no, don't be so sweet and innocent. Oh, this just makes me want to jump you." And, yeah, they're not really the best, crowd of people, and they're eventually, they let poor Taka go and he runs away. And our more effeminate character, Kara, is looking particularly jealous and having a sour face. And Yuji's all like, "Oh, don't be so jealous. I was just playing with him. He's just a plaything." And then, mwah, they start making out. And even though one of the other guys now starts watching these two boys making out and is clearly jealous of that relationship as well. I'm like, whoo, there's a lot of love triangles and jealousy going on in this weird friendship group. So the next day, Yuji has gone to his company. Well, it's not his company, it's his grandfather's company. And the grandfather is like, "It's time that you grew up and started, becoming a member of the company. It's time that you, fulfilled your role and stopped all these other pursuits and get your education and blah, 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 blah." And Yuji's all like, "Oh, I don't want to enter the company." He's like, "You will now be, my next in charge, my right hand man. You'll give up everything. Don't be like your father. Don't be a loser like him. And basically gives him like a big old pep talk about how he's got to join the company. He's got no say in it. And also, you stop hanging out with those guys. They're not good for you. And Yuji's like, you're the one that introduced me to them. You're the one that made me start hanging out with them. Because, you wanted like some business with them and stuff. And he's like, yeah, well, I've got what I want. I've decided that they've got bad reputation and I don't want you to have anything to do with them. And Yuji eventually leaves, stating how he feels like a fish in the trap. And basically, there's so much pressure, and he's got no choice over what he does with his life. He's just like following a pattern of what people tell him to do and making no decisions for himself. And he's feeling trapped and isolated in this world that's been thrust upon him. So meanwhile, we then cut to Karakawa walking towards the camera with his long hair and shirt, looking all sexy, and then suddenly turning into a werewolf. And you're like, what's going on? And it turns out that he's hanging out with his mate Azumashi, and he's created his VR headset, and he was trying it out. And he's like, oh, it's going to be the next best thing in VR technology and gaming. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to sell it for lots of money, and it's brilliant. And Azumashi's like, oh my God, you're amazing. This is amazing. It's genius. It's great. And then Karakawa is like, oh yeah, I should show it to Yuji. I should see if I can sell it. And then you notice how jealous Azumashi's getting, and he's like, oh no, only joking. And Azumashi, there's like only so much you can joke about these things and stuff. Oh, well then aren't you going to punish me? And he's like, yes, I'm going to punish you. And then sexy music plays, and there's lots of opening of shirts and kissing and sexy rubbing of bodies and hand jobs. And, it's quite nice sexy times. It's a scene that I could watch again. I'm like, yeah, these are some hot guys making out, being naughty, getting some nice moans and like, oh, this is lovely, and facial expressions going on while they hang out on the sofa. Oh, very nice. I was like, oh yes, good scene, well done. So it then just to the next day, and so far, like, Takara's been losing a bit of sleep because he's been lying in bed thinking about how beautiful Yuji is, and he's like, oh, so his friend is trying to cheer him up because his friend is like, you've been a bit down recently and a bit distant. Let's go to the arcade, play some games. And then this gang of like Yuji's friends are like, oh, that plaything from the other night. Quick, call like Yuji over and we'll stalk him a bit because, that's a normal thing for guys to do, hang around arcades stalking young boys. But it's yaoi fantasy. Random plot devices need to be put in place. So they stalk him for a bit, and then the two boys go their separate ways. Then it starts raining, and then things get a bit dark because the guys trap poor Taka in the rain, and somehow they don't really know, it's not really explained how, they convince it would be a really good idea if Yuji rapes him in the rain. And it's like, oh, well, this is not the start of a beautiful romance. This is quite a traumatic event for a 15-year-old boy, like in the rain with an older guy. Even if the boy was like, oh, I love him and I'm attracted to him, probably didn't want to just get randomly jumped in a park on his way home. But this again comes of one of these tropes of yaoi. There is a lot of rape and like inappropriate touching and molestation and that kind of stuff going on in yaoi. And while it's not a positive thing in our society, it is there as like escapist fantasy. It's yaoi fantasy. And you know what? People do have those fantasies. People know that they don't want to get raped in real life, but that fantasy of like a tall, dark, handsome stranger just appearing and wanting you and taking you, no questions asked, is a fantasy. And that's what this series is playing out. It's playing out that fantasy. And another reason that yaoi is full of this kind of things is because it's females having desire and having fantasies, but it playing out on male canvases, and therefore it makes it safer. It makes it safer to watch, it makes it safer to enjoy, because it's not being like these violent acts and these sexual acts are not being performed on another female body, and therefore there's that level of like distance to keep you safe and keep like how you feel about your body and how you feel about the situation, like safe, and I can understand that because like it's not done and it's not filmed and it's not animated in a way that's not a brutal, violent rape. It's done romantically, and which, it's problematic to people who don't have this fantasy, but I didn't find it problematic. I found it a bit like, I was more worried that like, well, the psychological like toll this is going to take on a young boy, and how it's not the most romantic first encounter, but the scene itself is Yuji just worshipping Taka. He loves his beautiful skin, how beautiful he looks. And then Taka himself is just like, this man is beautiful and he wants it and he holds on to him and then they kiss they're just. It would have been a very romantic sex scene if it hadn't been for the fact that it wasn't like consensual at the start. And well, I think my worst thing about it is not the fact that like it's like a sex scene. It's the fact that then they just leave poor Taka in the rain with just like his shirt covering his like private parts, and I'm like, you can't just leave him. You could catch hypothermia. It's just like that's so unfair. Like you've just done this awful thing to him, and yeah, it's kind of done as a sexual fantasy. But now you've left him in the rain, and he's going to get poorly. But alas, they don't care. They just leave him in the rain and go off. And after that, Yuji decides that actually, you know what? He doesn't want to hang out with these people anymore. He doesn't like them. He doesn't like their attitudes, the way they behave, like their choices they make, or the things they make him do. And so he's like, you guys are idiots. You're rubbish. I hate you. I'm going away. And a couple of the friends are like, you can't just walk away from us. We're a gang. We're in this together. And he's like, no, I'm done. And he walks out. So one of them threatens him. And then Karakawa is like, no, just let it go. Let him go. And Yuji leaves, Karakawa and Azumashi leave, and then you see this like little scene on the bridge where Karakawa goes up and he offers Yuji a cigarette. They have this like beautiful little romantic gesture of like both lighting the cigarettes and a little bit of a chat. And Karakawa's like, you know, I'm creating this amazing technology. It will work really well with your company. Why don't you invite me to come and join your company? And Yuji's like, look, I've got to quit everything. I've got to quit all my connections. I've got to enter the company. This is like the role I've been placed in. And I can't like have any more like connections to my past or what I've been doing up till now. And Karakawa's like, yeah, but you know, I would have followed you everywhere. You know how I feel. And Yuji's like, that's exactly why. And that makes Karakawa mad. So he goes to stab him. But Azumashi stops it. He holds the knife and goes, don't, you'll be as bad as, I can't remember the name of the friend that was threatening him earlier. Just let him go. Like, don't do something that will tarnish you and your reputation or make you feel worse. And Yuji's like, oh, cool, that's good. And so Azumashi punches him in the face and goes, you don't know how to love someone. You don't know how to show someone what it means to really be in love. Because obviously Azumashi really does love Karakawa and has been jealous of Yuji all this time. But he wants to take care of this other boy and doesn't want Yuji getting in their way and thinks Yuji's just messed around and played with him. And yeah, has had like none of it. So he hugs Karakawa and the two of them just embrace while Yuji walks off ready to like enter his job. And you're like, oh. And like the end of that love triangle and go on to his new life. Then it flashes forward a little bit more, and it's a new school year in a brand new school, and Taka and his best mate are in there, and they go, oh, what club's he going to join? What's it going to be? And Taka's like, well, it's obviously going to be the swim club. And you're like, oh, yeah, of course. So he goes, knocks on, and he opens it, and he's introduced to the swim team captain, and lo and behold, it's Yuji. And the two of each other stare at each other, and the music plays, and it ends, and it's like, oh, they fatefully met again. And you're left going, but what happens next? Like, what's going to happen? Like, I don't have the manga. It never got released in England. And I suppose I could find translations out there, but I really love buying things officially so I can support them. And I did own the manga in Japanese. And no matter how many times I flicked through it, I couldn't really tell what was going on because I don't speak Japanese. My Japanese is awful. I can recognise a couple of words here and there, but I certainly can't like read it. So I was a bit like, wait. And it turns out this OVA was made specifically as a prequel, and that the manga starts off from the moment the two of them like meet each other again, and it follows them and their relationship and the people outside the relationship that kind of want it to end for all the various reasons. But it sets up the bad blood between Yuji and that group of friends, and then the group of friends now are desperately trying to like ruin Yuji's life and stuff. And I'm like, I want to see this. I want to know what this is about. I want to know more. If I can't ever find it in English, I'm going to have to get translated copies, but I'm hoping somewhere there is a way for me to read it because I would like to know more. Because I always think it's a bit weird that this is like it's going to be a romance story when their first time was, you know, a non-consensual act in the rain that kind of became consensual during the course of it. But again, it's a yaoi trope. Molestation and rapey times somehow equals love in the magical land of yaoi anime. And I guess that not everyone is okay with that, but for me, I know it as a fantasy, and it was just a way of exploring a different angle of desire on a nice, safe canvas, an erotic canvas that looks good. And yeah, as I said, I'm not here to police people's pawns. I'm here to enjoy it and give my opinions and what I thought of things. And I like Fish in the Trap. It definitely makes me want to go and read the manga. I like the character designs. I like the dark side of it. I like my yaoi dark. I want it to be a little bit more twisted and a little bit more angst ridden. I don't like the fluff. So this one is definitely one for me. And yeah, if you don't mind the angst and the slightly non-consensual elements, then this is one you should check out as well. But for now, I'm going to say bye-bye.